Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for another Have Your Say video where you get to voice your opinion on the latest episode of Drag Race. And this video is for All Stars 9 episode 7. Today we're going to be recapping the episode, going through the results of the Have Your Say poll, and I'll be talking about a little bit of recent drama involving Plain Jane receiving some backlash over some comments she made about singer Chappell Roan. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. But before we get started, are you like me that you like listening to music or podcasts in bed, but you find headphones too uncomfortable to wear, especially if you're a side sleeper? Well, that's where Manta Sleep come in, and they are the sponsors of this video. Manta Sleep are the makers of the world's most effective blackout sleep mask to help you get a great night's sleep. I've talked about Manta Sleep before and how much I genuinely love their blackout sleep masks. And for example, this was a lifesaver on my recent 22-hour flight from Australia to the UK. But Manta Sleep were kind enough to send me their Manta Sound Mask. This mask has all of the great benefits of a usual sleep mask, such as being totally blackout, but also the C-shaped eye cups to take pressure off your eyes. But on top of that, this mask has razor-thin speakers in it so you can listen to your music and podcasts while lying down in bed. Simply connect any Bluetooth device to listen to whatever your heart desires, and the 20-hour battery life means that you can even listen to it all night long. You can easily adjust the position of the speakers so they perfectly align with your ears, and the material is incredibly breathable, which means that you can listen to it all night long and it's so comfortable to wear. Manta Sleep also have a range of other sleep masks, including cooling masks, steam masks, and even weighted masks. And what's more, if you use my code DRAGT, you can get 10% off any product at Manta Sleep, which means that you can have nights of peaceful slumber without breaking the bank. Check out the link in the description and the pinned comment. And thanks again to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video. So let's start by recapping the episode. The queens come back into the workroom and Angeria's really happy because she won last week. After all, the queens voted her as being delusional. Roxy then comes back in and she got snipped by Angeria for a second time. And Angeria does seem a bit worried about Roxy's reaction. And Roxy does seem a bit annoyed and says that Angeria is playing a different game than her, and there was a little bit of tension. And I do think that this is an interesting twist because I wasn't really expecting Angie to cut Roxy again, but I like that it did cause a little bit of drama because so far this season has been a bit drama light. But it doesn't seem like it's really all that serious. The next day, the queens come back into the workroom and Plastique starts talking about this thought that she's had, and she comes up with this idea and says that when we're blocking the queens, it's actually more strategic to block someone who has the same number as badges as you, because then they can't advance to get any more. Whereas if you block someone with more badges than you, it doesn't really do anything because that person will still have more badges than you. And some of the other queens aren't really buying it or don't quite understand the theory, but some people seem to think that Plastique is just saying that because she now is one of the front runners with the highest number of badges. So some people think that she might just be saying this as an excuse to throw other people off voting for her instead. RuPaul then comes in and we find out that the mini challenge for this week is that the queens have to carry pieces of fruit in their private areas and then drop it into a basket, and the queen that does the most amount of fruits wins. And I really liked this. I thought it was a really funny moment and it was a really funny idea, and we've never really quite seen this sort of thing before. And it was quite random, so I did appreciate that they're trying to do something a little bit different. And the bit that I found the most gross was the bit where Nina West was wearing the white trousers and you could see the stain where she had squished the fruit in her trousers. And the really interesting part is that the winner of this challenge, which was Nina West, actually gets immunity from being snipped this week. So RuPaul says that the Maxi challenge for this week is an acting challenge where the queens will unleash their inner bee and pay tribute to classic vamp movies. And these include things like Mummy Dearest, Mildred Pierce, Dynasty, The Boys in the Band, etc. And the movie is called Meeting in the Ladies' Room, and the queens will act opposite RuPaul. The queens then go about learning their lines, and what I thought was interesting is that in this particular instance, all of the roles have been predestined and pre-chosen and assigned to the queens. And I guess they're trying to do that based on who they think the queen most resembles from these original movies. Moving on to the actual filming, it's pretty much the standard that they show some people struggling, some people doing really well, and quite often it's really difficult to know whether this is accurate or whether they're just trying to push the narrative that a particular queen is going to do badly. But we could see that there are definitely some queens who are slightly struggling more than others. But I'll talk about more of that when we watch the actual scenes later on. Okay, so let's now move on to the runway for this week. And as usual, I won't give my opinions on the fashion, but I will say which of the looks was my favourite. So first up was Nina West, and she said she's living her Disney fantasy in the Haunted Mansion. And she's walking down the runway in this look, and it's all of her former lovers who have died. And it then reveals to a wedding dress because she's done crying over that man. Next we have Roxy Andrews, and she said she's walking down the runway sporting this corseted gorgeous wedding gown with blood dripping down her chest, and that's because she's just killed her husband right before the honeymoon. Next we have Angeria, and she said she's giving you Black Widow fantasy, and she built into her hair she has an urn, and this is where she keeps her dead husband's ashes, and after she's done capturing them in her web, she's killed them, and that's how she became a widow. Next we have Plastique Tiara, who said that for this runway she is wearing a traditional Vietnamese custom printed silk outfit, and it's a ceremonial attire for special occasions. Next we had Chanel, and she said she's walking down the runway in her black cover-up because she's a sad widow. And then when it comes to the end of the runway, it comes off and she's now able to rejoice in all of the wealth that she's gained from her now dead husband. Then we had Georges. She said that she's crying into this tissue, oh, and those are diamonds, and it reveals into this sickening red corset dress that's fitting her body so right. And even though her husband's dead, she's living her best life. Next we had Gottmik, and she said she designed this look with Marco, who then executed it. And it's a melting candelabra widow ghost situation that she's living in. And she's not going to the funeral, she is the funeral. And finally we had Miss Vanjie, who said that her husband's died and she's giving you lace body oddy, and she is looking very sexy at the funeral because her husband's died, so she's got to find a new husband to secure that check. I really loved this runway. I thought all of the queens really turned it out for this. I don't think there was a single bad look. I do think my favourite overall was probably between Gottmik and Plastique. Plastique's was just so amazing. There was so much detail. The train was huge. I also loved that she was representing her culture, but I think the outfit was just so intricate with so many details. It was kind of hard to really focus on each particular one because there was just so much amazing detail. But overall, she looked stunning as always. And I really liked Gottmik's because of this melted look. I thought that was really cool and it definitely fit the brief. And I just think Gottmik always turns it on the runway and it's always so chic and editorial. So between Plastique and Gottmik, I would say for me those were my two favourite. I'm not sure I could pick between the two because they were both quite different but really interesting interpretations of the theme. But let me know in the comments which of the outfits was your favourite and why. Okay, so now let's move on to the actual acting scenes. I'll go through each queen's scene and I'll give my thoughts on each queen. So first up we had Nina. I really enjoyed Nina. I definitely think she really had that campy element, and to me she was probably the one who embodied her character the most, and I really felt quite believable as a character. And to me she did make me laugh quite a few times, and I think she played well with RuPaul, and it really did remind me of those old Hollywood films. So for me, Nina was definitely one of the standouts. Next we had Roxy Andrews. I loved Roxy. I thought she was so funny. I do think her lines, as well as the premise of her skit, was probably one of the funnier ones from the writing side of it. And I really liked when she drank the drink and RuPaul said it was actually a urine sample. And then Roxy kind of finished it off at the end as well. I thought that was a really funny touch. And Roxy definitely really embodied this kind of high society villain character. And she looked amazing during it as well. Next, we had Angeria. Angeria was also a standout for me because I think she really had the attitude and she had that sassy look on her face. And I also felt she was a very believable character. She also did really well with interacting with RuPaul, and I feel as though she actually was listening to what RuPaul was saying and was matching RuPaul's energy, maybe better than some of the other queens did. So for me, Angeria was definitely a standout. Next, we had Plastique. I think Plastique probably looked the best out of everyone. Her outfit, as always, was amazing. In terms of her acting, I think she did a decent job given that she's not really known as an actress. But her acting did feel maybe a tiny bit stilted at times. And I think she just seemed like she was trying to get it done as quickly as possible. And I didn't necessarily believe her characterization as much as some of the other queens. So this was probably one of the weaker ones in my opinion. Next, we had Chanel. I thought Chanel looked really good. I loved this outfit with the one collar that was slightly bigger than the other. And Chanel always looks great because she has this very exaggerated old school style of drag. Unfortunately, I think Chanel looked really nervous and didn't seem like she was connecting that well, which we then heard later in the judges' critiques. But I unfortunately felt that too. So I think Chanel has a lot of potential and she did do a decent job, but I don't think this was her best effort or her best showing, unfortunately. Next, we had Georges. I thought Georges did okay. Again, she's not known as being an actress, so I think she did do better than I thought she might. I liked the bit where she got up on the chair and then she slapped Rue, and there was lots of slapping going on in this scene. Although obviously that is something that's written for the queens, is not necessarily something that is really the queen's decision. But overall, she did okay. I felt as though her lines, I'm not sure she quite delivered all of them in the best way. I think it didn't quite feel as believable as some of the other queens. So overall, this wasn't my favourite, but it was perfectly fine. Next, we had Gottmik. I thought Gottmik did a really good job. She definitely was going more along the lines of being quite believable but less campy, but definitely going into that more villain style of characterization. But she did her lines well. I think she interacted with RuPaul well. So overall, she did a good job. But it wasn't maybe the one that I remembered the most because it wasn't quite as campy and big characterization as some of the other queens. And then finally, we had Vanessa Vanjie Mateo. I think Vanjie is just such a funny person naturally. This clearly was just Vanjie. It wasn't really any other characterization. But Vanjie is just such a funny person, I don't really care. I really liked the scene. I thought she was very funny naturally, and it just came across as though she was having a normal conversation with RuPaul. So it was a decent job, but I do think it wasn't really a character, it was really just Vanjie, but still very funny. And then at the end of the scene, the bit that I loved the most was the bit where RuPaul just goes around and starts slapping all of the crew members. That to me was the funniest moment out of everything. Okay, so moving on to the judges' critiques, and we find out that the top two queens for this week are Nina and Angeria. And we'll get on to more of my opinions on that when we get to the comment section. So, Nina and Angeria then lip-sync to Lover Girl by Tina Marie. And Angeria is announced as the winner of the lip-sync. The queens then come on stage and Angeria decides that she's going to snip Gottmik. And again, this surprised me because I think everyone was expecting her to cut Plastique because Plastique seems the more obvious choice. But we'll get on to that a bit more when we talk about the comments of the Have Your Say poll. Okay, so now let's move on to the results of the Have Your Say poll, where you get to vote on whether you agree with the outcome of the episode. So, question 1 was, whose scene in the acting challenge did you like the best? And with 35.8% was Angeria, followed by Nina West with 24%, and then Vanessa Vanjie Mateo with 9.8%. And I do agree, I do think Angeria and Nina were probably two of my favourites. Angeria definitely had that really sassy attitude which worked really well. And Nina West is clearly a very campy queen, and that worked really well with the scene, and I think it made her stand out because she really went full camp compared to maybe some of the other queens. Question 2 was, do you prefer scripted acting challenges or improv acting challenges? And with the vast majority of 79.3% was improv, with only 20.7% for scripted. And I definitely agree, I prefer improv. Not only do I think that they're usually funnier because the queens have a bit more freedom and things like that, but also I think it's a fairer judge of who did the best, because with scripted acting challenges, we all know that certain roles are written funnier than others, and then it's just luck of the draw as to who gets what role, whereas with improv, you really are the maker of your own destiny. So I think it not only is funnier, but it's also a fairer judge of talent. Question 3 was, do you prefer when the queens do acting challenges amongst themselves or with RuPaul / the judges? And this was actually a really split vote, and it was almost 50-50. So the majority was 50.8% for acting with RuPaul or the judges, and then it was 49.2% for acting among themselves. And I can understand that because I think it's really nice to have both. I do like it when RuPaul or the judges do get involved, but I'm glad that they do switch it up because it would get boring if it was just one or the other. In this particular scene, I think it did work having just RuPaul because I'm not sure it would have quite worked as well with having all of the queens together. But I do think sometimes if it's just RuPaul or just the judges, it can be a little bit repetitive because there's only so much you can do with the same person. Question 4 was, who had the best runway look? And with 37.7% was Plastique Tiara, followed by Gottmik with 20.7% and then Vanessa Vanjie Mateo with 12.9%. And I definitely agree that Plastique really turned it out, as she always does. I did love the outfit. As I said, it was definitely one of my favourites. Not only was it stunning to look at, but also a great representation of her culture. And I always just wonder how queens pack some of these outfits because they're just so large and intricate. But she looked absolutely fabulous as always. Question 5 was, do you agree with the top 2? And again, this was a really split vote, with 50.3% for yes and no had 49.7%. And I was kind of surprised that it was so split because if we look back at the other question, which was question 1, whose acting challenge did you like the most? Angeria and Nina West got the most votes, and that was who actually won in the episode. But judging by this, it seems that more people were split on whether they agree with the top 2. So I do wonder whether people thought maybe someone else like Vanessa Vanjie Mateo should have won, perhaps, because she got the 3rd highest vote in question 1. And that was quite an interesting result. I'm not sure I quite know why it was so 50-50 based on the other data. So let me know in the comments why you voted yes or no. Question 6 was, who won the lip sync in your opinion? And with the vast majority of 73.7% was Angeria, with Nina only getting 26.3%. And I do agree, I think Nina didn't seem like she could move quite as freely, but I also don't think she embodied the song that much. Whereas I thought Angeria really turned it out and she was really moving around and she was really embodying the song because it is quite an upbeat song with a lot of emotion in it. So I definitely think Angeria deserved the win. Question 7 was, who would you cut / snip? And with 67.7% of the vote was Plastique Tiara, with Gottmik getting 15.3 and Roxy Andrews getting 12.1. And I definitely was really surprised. I thought Plastique was definitely going to get snipped because she has the most amount of badges compared to other people. But I really think, judging by the preview for next week's episode which they showed, it seemed that Gottmik was quite annoyed at Angeria for cutting her. But it seems that Angeria said that she really took what Plastique said about blocking someone with the same amount of badges as you because that's a more strategic move. So it's difficult to know whether Angeria really felt that way or maybe she let herself be persuaded by Plastique. Who knows? I guess we'll have to wait till next week. But I definitely was really gagged because I probably would have blocked Plastique if it was up to me. And then finally, question 8 was, who is the front runner so far? In other words, most likely to win the competition. And with 38.6% of the vote was Angeria, followed by Plastique with 27.4, and then Roxy with 20.7. And this was quite interesting because I feel like this question fluctuates quite a lot depending on that week's episode. Because so far, people like Gottmik and Plastique have been very high, and Angeria hasn't necessarily been that high in this vote. But I guess because Angeria's won quite a few in a row or in the recent episodes, I guess that's why she's quite high up. I do think Angeria is a fierce competitor, so it will be interesting to see how that shakes out for the rest of the season. Okay, so now let's move on to the comment section. And the first comment came from my Patreon member Ashley, who said, I loved it when RuPaul gets slap happy in the acting challenge. And there was also another comment by my Patreon member Shelby who said, "The best part of this episode was when tons of the set crew came out to get slapped by Ru. They looked like they had the best time getting to participate. I love stuff like that. Even Bruno got slapped." And quite a few people commented on this in the Have Your Say poll as well, saying, "I love the crew involvement at the end of the acting challenge." And I definitely agree, this was by far the funniest bit. I thought the skits themselves were not necessarily that interesting, all of them. Some of them were funny, but other ones were not. But I definitely loved the moment where different crew members came out and got slapped by RuPaul, especially people like Bruno from the pit crew, because I didn't necessarily see that coming. And it did look like RuPaul was having loads of fun, and it was a genuine fun moment. And those are the bits I think are always the best in Drag Race, rather than necessarily the scripted bits. The next comment comes from my Patreon member Brennan, or Breezy Mills. And they said, "Angeria was top tier in this challenge. I also think she chose the correct person to block. No offense to Plastique, but I think Gottmik is more of a threat to win than Plastique." And this is a very interesting topic of conversation because I was really gagged, as I said, that Angeria chose to block Gottmik rather than Plastique. I can see from a strategic point of view, it does make sense to block someone who's at the same level as you because you can stop them from advancing further. I'm not sure if I agree that Plastique is less of a threat than Gottmik. I think they both have different skill sets, but they're both very fashion queens. So if there's lots of fashion and design challenges, I think that those two could edge their way to the top of the competition. So I think it really just depends on what the rest of the competition has in store in terms of the challenges. And then my Patreon member Gardy said, "Can we take a moment to fangay over Michelle's judges panel look? Mother turned it out." And I agree, Michelle always looks great, but this particular week I did love this two-tone that she was going for, and it was just so chic, and I think it really teamed with the theme of having the widow element because everyone else was in black whereas she was mostly in white, so I think that contrast worked really well. And moving on to some of the other comments, some people also talked about the fact that the ending was a complete gag and they did not see that coming, and I assume they're referring to Angeria deciding to cut Gottmik rather than Plastique. A few other people said that they thought the episodes were a bit boring so far and this was the most boring episode. I do think acting challenges can go either one of two ways. Either they're amazing and really funny or they can kind of flop. I thought this was maybe somewhere in the middle. I think some of them were funny, but for the most part, it was basically just slapping and saying slightly rude comments to people. But it was overall a fun episode, but it probably wasn't my favourite of the episodes so far. And one of the other things that came up so many times was people said that they felt sorry for Chanel and they really want her to win a badge. And I agree, I really like Chanel. I think she's really funny and she's a great queen with a really interesting personality, but she definitely seems to be getting in her head a lot, which is why I think she's not winning things. But it must be really difficult to be the only queen not winning, especially this week because she got slightly negative critiques and it's getting near the end of the competition now. So unfortunately, I don't think Chanel's necessarily going to be able to catch up very easily with the other queens in terms of how many badges she wins. But I really hope she does win at least one thing because she definitely deserves it. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a little bit of recent drama online involving Plain Jane receiving some backlash about some negative comments that she made about Chappell Roan. For those of you who don't know, Chappell Roan is the stage name of an American singer-songwriter named Kaylee, who identifies as a lesbian. She's known for her eccentric style, and she says that she's heavily influenced by the world of drag. And Chappell has since said on the Q with Tom Power podcast that she has been told by other drag queens that she is a drag queen, and since then, Kaylee said that she's realised that Chappell Roan is her drag project. Chappell was a relatively unknown artist until she performed at Coachella in 2024, and since then she has surged in popularity. However, in a since-deleted tweet, Plain Jane criticised Chappell and said, "Will I get tomatoes thrown at me if I say Chappell Roan's love for drag feels performative as F? No shade, queen, secure the bag." And this was followed up by another tweet that said, "I'm all for artists performing and celebrating drag, just a skeptic being skeptical." Plain Jane received a lot of backlash about this, with people saying that it's weird that Plain is a gay man and dresses as a woman, but she rejects a queer woman and is not acknowledging her as being a drag performer. People then started to point out that in many instances, Chappell has supported drag, such as showing up at drag shows. Chappell has also paid homage to several drag legends such as Divine, and some people also said that her style is similar to Jinx Monsoon. At Coachella, during her performance, Chappell said that she was, quote, your favourite artist's favourite artist. And when she later appeared on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, Chappell clarified that that was a reference to Sasha Colby, who said in her Meet the Queen interview that she is your favourite drag queen's favourite drag queen. A few other queens have also said they love Chappell Roan, such as Victoria Scone from Drag Race UK, Pythia from Canada's Drag Race, and RuPaul even posted a TikTok saying that Chappell Roan was his new obsession. Plain then seemingly responded to the backlash that she had received and tweeted saying, it's funny how whenever I seem to step out of line with some of these, quote, fans, they immediately double down on calling me a man. I don't particularly take offence to that because, hey, drag comes off, but something about it in this context seems disrespectful as bleep, particularly because of how hypocritical it is. Of course, the first people to do so are the ones who correct others when they use he pronouns for drag queens or call drag queens by their government names, or even want people to be respectful of how they themselves identify. By all means, keep calling me a man, whatever, to fuel your little online arguments. Just know that you don't effing know me like that, boo, and you'll never have the pleasure to. However, later on, Plain deleted the critical tweet about Chappell and instead tweeted several supportive things about Chappell, such as this tweet with a photo of a banknote with the words Gag City written on it, with the caption, oh my god, ran into Chappell Roan at my last gig and she tipped me this. The feeling is mutual, girl, I love you so much, see you in Gag City. Plain also tweeted once saying, I love at Chappell Roan. Plain then posted some screenshots of what looked like messages that someone had sent, where they claimed that Plain had said that lesbians can't do drag, but the name was blocked out. And Plain had seemingly messaged this person, saying that that's not what she said, and asked them to stop spreading misinformation. And the person apologised and said that they would delete the tweet. Plain later followed this up with another tweet that said, hi everyone, I want to formally apologise to my fans who have been so stressed out on my behalf, going to war left and right. Please rest easy, mother is booked, blessed and pumped. And after the Jimmy Fallon interview with Chappell Roan came out, Plain tweeted this. How I feel after clowning on the goddess Chappell right before her iconic Fallon interview where she mentioned Sasha Colby. And that seems to be the end of the drama, and Plain hasn't tweeted about it anymore since then, and I don't think Chappell has posted at all about the situation either. So there you go, there was the Have Your Say video for All Stars 9 episode 7. How are you enjoying All Stars 9 so far? And who do you think is going to win the crown? Let me know in the comments. And I'd just like to give a special shout out to my newest Patreon members, Jessica and Dan, who recently joined in the You're a Winner Baby tier. Jessica and Dan, you are both winners, baby. And if you'd like to get early access to my videos as well as have your comments featured in my Have Your Say videos, please check out my Patreon and consider supporting me. It goes such a long way to helping support my channel and I really, really appreciate it. And I'll put a link to my Patreon in the description. I'd also like to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreon members who are amazing and support me every month. Thank you so much for being part of my Patreon. I really, really appreciate it and I really do love my Patreon community. You are all legends. If you liked this video, please remember to like and comment on the video to help tell the algorithm that this is a great video, and make sure you hit the subscribe button because it really does make such a big difference to my channel. Thank you for watching and I hope you'll join me again in future videos. Thank you, bye!